Okay, this is my dog. That's another picture of him while he's yawning, and this is a picture of him after he was done yawning. I also obviously have him right here. This is my little buddy. He is a Yorkie, Yorkshire Terrier, and over the course of his life, he's had a few health issues, and every time that we've gone to the vet, they followed up the diagnosis with, and this is something we see somewhat regularly with Yorkies. And that's for a number of different things. His knees slide in and out for some reason. He has a cortisol disorder. He had teeth extracted. He makes kidney stones at an unusually quick rate for some reason. All of these, every time we've gone to the vet and said, this is what's happening, they give us the diagnosis and they say, this is somewhat common in Yorkies, or we've seen this before in dogs of his breed. Additionally, I don't know if you can see, there's a dog in the background. This is our other dog. He is a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, purebred, and he is significantly younger, but also has already had ear infection issues and a problem with one of his knees. And when we've had those issues, the vet has said, this is not super uncommon for dogs of this breed. And that had tagged on with the idea that both of these dogs are purebred. We have another dog that's not. She won't be in this video. And they're the ones with the health problems. Some significant, some not, but they're the ones with the health problems. And then we came across this idea that purebred dogs are less healthy. And that's what we're talking about today. Welcome to my channel. I make medium depth dives on questions that I think are interesting. If you have a question you want me to look into, put it in the comments. Also, if I say something that's just wrong and you call it out in a comment, I might pin your comment. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how dogs got domesticated in general. There are a couple different theories about how it happened, but every theory agrees that humanity at one point started domesticating or working alongside wolves, and those wolves turned into dogs, and those dogs turned into Yorkshire Terriers. So there are a couple theories. One is campfire theory, where wolves could smell what humans were cooking on the campfire and thus followed them at a great distance and picked up food scraps along the way as humanity migrated. The wolves would pick up the scraps, and then eventually interaction happened, and then eventually domestication, and then eventually Yorkshire Terriers. Another theory is migratory wolves theory. This is the idea that wolves traveled in packs and followed herds of prey like reindeer, and they were some of the earliest animals to do this because as predators they had really good endurance, so they could keep up with the prey. And then humanity saw that and thought, that's a really good idea, I'm going to try that as well. So humans started following the same herds, and instead of competing, probably happened in some situations, instead of competing with the wolves, they started working together to follow and take food off of this herd. And then the interaction happened, and then the Yorkies happened. Another idea is food partitioning theory, which is similar, but the idea is that people are not carnivores, so we can really only eat a certain percentage of our food as protein, as meat, but wolves were carnivores, so they could eat 100% meat, so sharing was pretty beneficial, and that's how the interaction, domestication, Yorkies happened. There are some particularly old species, and we can talk about some of them right now. Some pretty old purebred species. This is the Akita Inu, a Japanese dog that I think dates back thousands of years, as all of these dogs right here will. It was the Akita Inu was owned by samurai and was used for hunting and fighting. And we're also going to list the health problems for these dogs, which, sorry, but Akita Inus have a lot of health issues that I can't pronounce. However, I can say lupus and food and environmental allergies. Otherwise, I'm not going to try to say those. Hopefully you can read them. Another dog, which actually holds the Guinness World Record of oldest dog species, is the Greenland sled dog. It's also called the Canadian Inuit dog. They have the different names depending on where they live, Greenland or Canada, but they're similar enough that they are the same breed. They were used as sled dogs. They pulled sleds. They also were able to sniff out seal breathing holes and were used for hunting in that capacity. And then during the summer when there wasn't snow, humans put packs on their backs and they were actually just able to carry a good deal of weight. And they are generally healthy dogs, actually, but as bigger dogs, they have issues, the same issues that a lot of bigger dogs have, which are hip and elbow dysplasia. There's also the Saluki, which is a Middle Eastern sight dog, which had particularly good endurance. It has some common health problems, such as valve disease and arrhythmia in the heart. There's the Basenji, which is an awesome dog, actually, really cool from my Google searches. Comes from the African plains, is the smallest dog that I've mentioned so far, other than the Yorkie, and because it was in the plains and it was shorter than the grass, they have a really good vertical leap. They can just jump super high, and their barks are more like sirens, which is really, really neat if you don't own one, probably. They're generally thought to be pretty healthy dogs, but it's advised to check for hypothyroidism. And last old breed that we'll go over is the Greyhound, which is another Middle Eastern dog, which, as I think we're all aware, is super fast. And it has some common health problems for the Greyhound are bloat and gastric torsion. So, where does the idea come from that these dogs, these purebred dogs, are healthier than mixed breed dogs? There are a few, I think. One being, maybe the main one being the idea of inbreeding. If people want a predictable behavior or personality or look, aesthetic to a dog, then they will breed dogs that have those behaviors, aesthetics, and attitudes. And then eventually you probably get some inbreeding in there, which makes the descendants less healthy overall. You also have poor breeding conditions. Pretty much, breeders are incentivized to make money. So they want to produce as many dogs as people will buy, and they want to produce predictable dogs, which are the purebred dogs. So they'll just pump out as many of these dogs as they can and not care too much about the living conditions for the dogs early on. And that will lead to health problems down the road. Also, lastly, maybe just some confirmation bias. That's something we always kind of got to check for. But I think there's an idea that if a purebred dog has health problems, it's probably due to the genetics. But if a mixed breed dog has health problems, it's probably due to life factors and things that have happened since its birth. And I don't think that those are necessarily true, but I think that's kind of the perspective that we hold. So, is it true? Are purebred dogs less healthy? Well, yes, but actually no, and by that I mean maybe. I've got two sources down here that I looked at, and one is a study from about 10 years ago. The other is a study from about a year or two ago. The older one looked at genetic diseases in different dog breeds, purebreds versus mixedbreds, and found that more genetic diseases are prevalent in purebred than there are in mixed, and then there are some genetic diseases that are equally prevalent in both. However, the more recent study with I think over 20,000 dogs had dog owners report the dog's purebred status, its breed, and its health conditions as the dog aged and time went on. And that study found that there was essentially no difference in the long-term health of purebred versus mixed breed dogs. Now, both of these have some slight limitations. For example, if you're only looking at genetic diseases, maybe you're not capturing everything, but also if you are asking people to report data and trusting that wholeheartedly, you're probably missing some things. So, does everyone just kind of believe a myth that purebred dogs are less healthy? Well, yes, but actually no, but also what I actually mean is maybe. When I looked this up, this idea, this myth, I found different things depending on where I searched it, actually. When I go onto YouTube and I search, are purebred dogs healthier? Or how to make sure you get a healthy dog, is a whole bunch of videos very confidently giving you the advice that mixed breed dogs are healthier. And when I searched on Google, Google would pull up Reddit pages, and those Reddit pages had people who thought of it with a little more nuance, saying that maybe it's probably more likely that the living conditions of the dogs are more important than the actual breeding. Though regardless, everybody kind of agrees that there are certain breeds that are just less healthy. For example, pugs are the classic example for that. So another thing I want to add is that the idea of a purebred dog is just kind of made up. So there are different organizations which define what a breed is, and they accept certain breeds and they don't accept certain breeds. For example, my doggy right here, he's a Yorkshire Terrier. Those were not acknowledged as a breed of dogs by the American Kennel Club until 1885, which is relatively recent in history when we're looking at the scope of dogs and the relationship between dogs and humanity. Because again, all the other dogs we're looking at, their breeds are thousands of years old. And for reference, when we're looking at thousands of years old, some of these dogs have been around humanity before agriculture. And the Yorkshire Terrier was only recognized as a breed in the US in the same year that Coco Chanel and Benito Mussolini were born. That's just kind of an arbitrary thing. These Yorkies did not become more healthy in 1885. And to further nail down the arbitrariness of this, my other dog that we talked about a bit today is a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. They were recognized as an official breed in the UK, in Britain, in 1945. And it wasn't until 50 years later in the US, 1995, that they were recognized as an official breed. Those years are when Steve Martin and Timothy Chalamet were born, respectively. I assume you can figure out which one's which. So that's ridiculously arbitrary. Cavaliers were not less healthy in 1944 in Britain, and then more healthy in 1995 in Britain, and less healthy in 1994 in the US, and more healthy in 1995 in the US. If I had those same two dogs, a Yorkie and a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, in 1880, anywhere, I would have two dogs that do not have a recognized purebred status. If I had both of these dogs in 1900 in the US, I would have one dog that was recognized and one dog that was not. If I had them in 1950 in Britain, I would have two dogs that were. If I had them in 1950 in the US, I would have one dog that was and one dog that was not. If I have them right now in the US, they're both recognized. Does that change their health? Not really. Right? This is just kind of an arbitrary thing. So if we look at the American Veterinary Medical Association's advice for choosing a healthy dog when you're looking to get a dog, none of that advice has anything to do purebred status of the dog. It has to do with things like the immediate health and personality of the dog at the time that you are purchasing it. Things like the quality of its eyes, the quality of its coat, how much it weighs, if that weight looks healthy, is it immediately ill, and is it friendly, not afraid, and not aggressive. So, final question, why were all these vets always telling me this is a very common thing for dogs of this breed? Well, I have a few ideas now that we've ended up here. If a dog has a set breed, a recognized breed, that dog will be categorized with other dogs of that breed. And the vet will see this issue and go, I've seen other dogs in this category with this issue. And maybe I'll bring it up. If a dog does not have a recognized breed, then it will not be categorized. It doesn't have, they don't have any shelf to put it on in their memory bank. So it's just how their memory works. Another thing is a purebred dog is easier to predict, but not necessarily healthier. Maybe a purebred dog will have the same health over the course of its life as a mixed breed dog, but if it gets sick, we know which sicknesses those will be. Whereas a mixed breed dog has the same health, but we don't know what sickness it might get. That's very possible. Anytime you look up any breed of dog, you can very quickly find the most common sicknesses, the most common health conditions. I showed them to you earlier, and in 2 of the examples I said this is a relatively healthy dog, but this is most common. That does not mean the dog will always get that. That does not mean that the dog will always be unhealthy. That means if the dog is unhealthy, there's a decent chance it's this. Additionally, maybe those vets and vet techs were just trying to be nice, make us feel not bad about the fact that our dog was sick, and this is just something that they see and they deal with every day and they want to normalize it, and they were just being nice. That's probably the bottom of that rabbit hole, quite frankly. They were probably just trying to be nice to us. So that's it.